Muted.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Elwood Jones.
I'm Jay Clark. I'm one of Elwood's attorneys.
And I'm Dave Hine. I'm another of Elwood's attorneys.
Thanks so much for being here. I kind of like to start off by just hearing a little bit about sort of the things that led up to your conviction, Elwood. Like what happened, like what took place for you to kind of face a conviction, and then maybe a little bit about the path to exoneration.
Okay, you're muted now.
I went to work one morning, September 3rd, 1994 at the Embassy Suite. And that morning while I was working, I injured my hand and had went out to the dumpster and slipped going up the stairs, scratched my hand, got infected. And I come back in, finished working, and I have to clean my hand. About 9, I think somewhere around 9 that morning, there was a scream in the hotel of a woman up on the 2nd floor. And that's when it seemed that Nathan Rothman was supposed to have been dead in her room. It went from there to investigation. Everybody, to me, the police and everybody was running around like their heads was chopped off, didn't know what to do. And a week later, my hand got infected. No, 3 days later, really, but my hand was infected. I went to the hospital. I went to workman's comp, and they sent me over to Bethesda Hospital to see a doctor. It was a doctor named John Chami and McDonald. John Chami did the surgery. McDonald assessed he was his, I don't know, student or what. I went. I laid in the hospital for over a week, 10 days. I got out on the 10th. The 12th, I went to see my doctor. And after I seen him, I took some papers out to the hotel and tell him I was on light duty. And I went to see a friend. And next thing I know was history. I was put in a circle of being investigated for Nathan Rothman's murder. And that's about all I can say about it. And I went to the police station on the 12th. And I stayed, I got there around 2 o'clock. They asked me would I volunteer to come in and talk. I said, sure. I went in and I stayed and talked to them. And they didn't release me until about 1 in the morning. And when they released me, they gave me a ticket saying I failed to register in the city of Blue Ash with a record. So I knew it was a ticket. So I went looking for an attorney. I had called a few and they told me to go to John West. And that's how I ended up getting John West. Then I come to find out this is what I've been investigated for. And for a year later, from that day, 1 year later, I was arrested on September 27th. And during the questioning me at District 1, 2 of the officers, Stokes and Lilly, came at me and said, look what we found in your briefcase. I looked at it. I said, if you found it in there, you put it. He went out in the hallway and got on the phone, and all I know is who he was talking to. He said he didn't bite. That's it.
Tell them what it was that they showed you.
It was a pendant, a picture of a pendant. Said this was in the trunk of my car.
Yeah, so it took they investigated you for a year, and it took you a year to be like arrested for the crime. Jay and David, can you talk a little bit about maybe like when you met Elwood, at what part in the case, and how you became part of his crew, I guess.
You want me to go?
Yeah, you go first. You've known him longer.
When Elwood went to trial, he had 2 appointed attorneys. One was Kathy Adams, the other was Julia Sanks. Kathy and I shared office space in the same building, same office. So I got to know Elwood like early on in the process when they were getting ready for trial. I didn't represent him, but I was with Kathy. We brainstormed, we worked on it together. So I've known him almost from day one. After the conviction, he went through the direct appeals and the appellate process, and he had different counsel then. And in 2015, I think it was, I was contacted by the federal habeas unit to see if I'd be willing to help get him a continuance for 2 weeks on a motion that they had filed. And here we are 10 plus years later.
I jumped in much later in the process, but in about 2019, the motion that Jay was brought in, or one of the motions that was filed shortly after Jay was brought in, was the motion for a new trial. And when the Court of Common Pleas indicated that there would be an evidentiary hearing on that, Jay, I think, reached out to the habeas unit and said, hey, is there anyone else who can help on this? Because there are a lot of witnesses to cover. And through kind of a convoluted relationship with someone at my firm, they got to me and my partner, Emily St. Cyr, and she and I got on the case with Jay in late 2019.
Yeah, so we're hearing some great lawyer terms out here. Can you guys tell us a little bit about sort of what was wrong with the conviction and the process of becoming exonerated? So what did it take? Like I know that when somebody is wrongfully convicted, it is a really, really hard. So I heard a little bit about motion for a new trial. So what was wrong with the conviction and what work did you all have to do to prove Elwood's innocence?
So, we had a 3-day evidentiary hearing to discuss what was wrong with the conviction and really only kind of scratched the surface. So I don't know that we can give you the whole picture there. The short version is the prosecutors withheld virtually all of the evidence and misrepresented to both the court and the jury, as well as Elwood and his original trial team, what evidence did and did not exist. They represented to the jury that they were being shown all of the evidence that had been gathered and that nobody at the hotel had seen anything, et cetera, when in fact there were literally thousands of pages of documents that had been withheld, hundreds of documents from witnesses who did report seeing suspicious things that would not have implicated Elwood at all, and all kinds of documents that just completely undermined the theory of guilt, or the theory of the case that the state presented to the jury. If the jury had seen all of the evidence as it exists, the state couldn't have even made the case. It couldn't have even tried to make the case with a straight face that they ultimately used to have Elwood convicted and then sentenced to death.
What were some of those things? You guys mentioned the pendant briefly, and then there were some. So the pendant, the eyewitnesses. So there was multiple different stories from eyewitnesses. I know that some of that wasn't like followed through, right? Like they didn't follow up on reports they got. Was there anything else that like really stuck out in that case?
I think the biggest thing, and Mark Pietmeyer still clings to this fairy tale even today, was they stood up and in his closing argument made the argument to the jury that this pendant that was allegedly found in Elwood's toolbox in the trunk of his car was a unique, one-of-a-kind pendant made from family heirloom rings. And they knew 2 weeks after the murder that in fact was not true. They withheld the investigative report where the 2 detectives from Blue Ash had gone to New York to investigate the case and meet the family. And they were told to contact a specific relative. He would know. They called Uncle Ira. He goes, "Oh no, I have those rings. He bought that in a jewelry store in the Bronx. It's not special." They withheld that. The reason that I think that's so significant is in their closing argument, Mark Pietmeyer stood up and said, "We don't have any direct evidence. We don't have fingerprints. We don't have DNA. We've got something better. We've got this unique, one-of-a-kind pendant." And I bet Elwood didn't know that when he stole it, but that's how you know that he's the one who did it. And he knew, he being Pietmeyer, in his files were police reports that directly contradicted that. So if you take that argument away from them, it really cripples their case. But then they also withheld the fact that the pendant was not found in Elwood's car. And what I mean by that is there was a form that the coroner's office completed when they did a car search as part of their routine practice. And Blue Ash had the car towed from where they seized it, secured it in the Blue Ash garage. The next day, they took it to the Hamilton County Coroner's Lab, where forensic scientists searched the car. In the form they filled out, it's got a little diagram and a place on the bottom for comments. They searched the car inside and out, including the trunk. The only thing in the trunk was some rags, tools for working on a car, nothing of evidentiary value found. It was only after the car was then towed back to Blue Ash that now deceased Officer Bray claimed to have found the pendant, giving it one last chance to search the car after it had already been searched by people whose jobs was specifically looking for evidence. They withheld that form, they withheld that information. So if you take that and you combine it with Pete Meyer's dishonesty in the it's unique, one of a kind theory, if you take the pendant out of it entirely, they have nothing that connects them there. And just those two documents, I think alone would have actually changed the whole outcome of the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's quite frankly, it's quite a story. And I remember I met you, Elwood, when you were still inside, and when you got out, it was, I mean, I was shocked. It was exciting. It was really incredible. Elwood, can you talk a little bit about like the experience of you spent like nearly 30 years like proving to prove your innocence? Can you talk a little bit about like what that experience was like? Like, what did hope feel like? Did you believe this would happen? Yeah.
To be honest with you, no. I had got several disappointing letters from people I wrote, but I still just kept writing, and I said maybe one day someone would like actually take a look at the files, and it did. I think the first break I got, I was at Central Ministry in New Jersey. They sent my files no, they contacted me and told me they didn't have the money to come back to Ohio and investigate. And it said they wasn't saying it wasn't worthy of investigate. They just didn't have the staff for the money. So asked me what I wanted to do with the files. And I told them, hold on, let me think. And I had them sent to Amber Hunt. And she looked at them and she came down and interviewed with me, and that gave me a little hope. And now something else happened. It turned around in 2016. I got a letter from a woman named Dolores Suggs, her daughter, an email saying that her mother was in jail with a woman. And the woman said that her husband committed this murder and trained a black man. And no one seemed to believe that. I said, it's right there in the paper. All I'm asked to do is look at it. And I had my attorneys at first, I had to turn name Aaron, and she said, how is this possible? I said, I don't know. I feel that all I'm doing is getting you what somebody gave me. So it's been a journey. It has been a real journey. I'm thankful, and in the end, I'm really thankful. I met a team of attorneys that I actually owe my life to. That they gave me my life back. I lost a lot, but I'm still alive.
Yeah, that's pretty special. And Aaron's team, like they did end up tracking down this woman, right? And she
didn't, that Aaron and them looked for this woman for 2 years, and they kept getting reports back that they didn't have these two people in jail. They was never in jail. They was never arrested. The Blue Ash police never arrested this woman. They took her down to the Hamilton County, and when she first told him, she said, well, we can't find no records of Dolores Suggs or Linda Reed in jail. I said, they got to be. So happened, she sent me some documents, and I seen the detective who took her down, and I said, right here. He took Linda Reed, so he can't say she wasn't in that jail. So I say, so where's them records? It was another lady named Ann Olman is the one who, her and a lady named Cheryl Horns, put it in the computer. Oh, Lord behold, what pops up? These two people.
They were able to find that corroborate that they were locked up together at the same time that they were told they were locked up together in the same place they said they were locked up together. So it corroborated all those facts. And I think one of the problems was we were looking for records from a jail from 25 years before.
Yeah, and they were able to find a number of other kind of indicia of credibility as well that supported the fact that what Dolores Suggs was saying, and critically, she also said that she had called the Blue Ash Police Department before Elwood's trial and reported to them that another man had confessed, and that was another piece of detail or piece of information that had been withheld from Elwood and his trial team.
Another line they didn't follow.
Right.
Elwood, did you ever have a moment where you felt pressured to take a plea or to cooperate? How did that weigh on you? Yeah, tell us about that.
You know, most people don't know that the day that I got arrested in 2020, 95, a week later, I was offered a plea, a manslaughter. And my family come up in there and told me, I said, I ain't done nothing. What I'm gonna plead guilty for? And through my whole trial, I even told the Judge Winkler, I said, yesterday you was gonna offer me a plea. Today you want to kill me. Make sense of this. And still to the day, I said, if Jay or Dave would come and say, well, they're gonna let you go, you got to do this alpha plea. I said, I guess I'm getting ready to die because it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, so you're like,
to
yeah,
clear my name, I had lost everything. I lost my pants and all. And all I wanted to do is tell them they can rest in peace. I have cleared our name of something that I know I did. So I couldn't take no plea.
I think that's like one of the like strongest things I remember from meeting from you is that you're just like, I'm innocent. I'm not taking anything less than that. So I think that's like a really powerful thing to witness from you, is like really hold on to that like integrity. That's like really important to you. Yeah. David or Jay, is there anything that you would say to like, maybe just like the issue with plea deals or anything around like Alford plea or anything you would add to that?
I mean, I think in general, that kind of pressure is one of the ways that the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office has saved being exposed like they have been in this case. I think if you go back and you look at cases from Hamilton County, Elwood is not the first case with a Brady violation or a Brady violation this egregious or with this much misconduct. But what they do is they have people who've been on death row so long, they go, well, here's what we'll do. You plead no contest, we'll give you credit for time served, and you're done. And that's how the inherent evil of this stays buried, because no one ever picks up, oh, they withdrew the plea, he got to replead times. No one cares at that point. It very seldom makes the news. But if you go look and you do a review of the cases that Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office have engaged in misconduct, it's amazing how they've been able to use that dark plea, that the pressure to get out at any cost, to get off death row at any cost, to get your freedom at any cost. You'll admit to anything. And I'm not faulting people for that, but they've leveraged that, and that's how they've taken advantage and protected these. Elwood's not the first case. It's just the first one that's blown up like this for them. And they've managed to put that off because they get people to take that plea. And it's inherently evil.
Thanks. Thank you. I kind of want to switch to Elwood. So you were able, while you were waiting your retrial, were able to like be out, like out on bail. I want to hear a little bit about like what it was like to get out. Where did you go first? What are some of the things you did? Yeah. And what's maybe one thing that you refused to let that system take from you?
Well, it was kind of hard at first for me because everything had changed in this city. Like my nephew took me around a few places, and then I got to get out a little bit more. They didn't have phones when I left here. That's something new. There wasn't no cell phones or nothing. And I still trying to learn everything about iPhone and computers. They wasn't out there. They may have one or two computers.
Big learning curve.
It's a real big learning curve, and it still is. So I'm thankful and something in my church. And I'm thankful for them, the people over there at High Park, because they have guided me in ways that I don't think no one else could, and picked me up even when I'm feeling bad.
Do you want to tell a little bit about like how you came to like meet the people at that church, and like a little story of how you've kind of grown a little community there?
Yes. There was an organization when I was on death row sent through your organization, sent cards on Christmas time. And a lady named Andre Sloan had sent me a card. And when I got out, I was at your event, an annual event, and Jan Seymour was there along with her husband. And I asked him, I told him, I said, I would like to meet your members of your church. So the following day I called her and I set it up to go there. And I've been there for over a year, and I wouldn't change it today. I pray for
what sort of things do you do with the church? Like what sort of activities do you take part in?
I volunteer downtown. I feed the homeless. On Saturdays, I do other things. I go to the restaurant center and talk and feed down there. And I was going to Price Hill on Thursdays and feeding kids and reading to them. And just things like that I do.
Yeah.
And I do other little things they have come up, volunteer service or help several little something.
Sorry, I got distracted by a question. I think it's really cool to hear just about like how you get to like spend time out community now and the people you get to be around. Can you share a little bit maybe about like your family and like maybe the first place you visited when you got out, some of those things?
The first place I visit was the cemetery. I visit my mother now, it's grave. And I come home after that. And second place I visit was I visit family members outside, and I went to my Chinese offices, but I haven't done too much outside of that. I've come to your office. So.
That's true. You do come hang out at Ignite.
I try to, wherever I go still today, I try to make sure I got somebody can verify that he was here. And so I don't just scatter and go everywhere. I still got something in the back of my head. I don't know somebody at me. So I try to stay in a safe zone.
I think that's a lot of pressure too, right? A lot of pressure that folks experience, like long lasting trauma. And especially when you hear some of the rhetoric that we've heard from Joe Dieters and other people. To shift a little bit, as we're thinking about your wrongful conviction and some of the like Brady violations and things like that we've heard about. So when prosecutors withhold evidence, what is one thing you would change in Ohio or in Cincinnati so that things like this don't happen again? And I'll let all three of you answer this one, and then I'll have some follow-up too.
I would like for immunity to be taken off the table for prosecutors. Prosecutors have this theory they throw out to everybody that no one is above the law. Well, that should include you too. If no one is above the law, if you break the law and you cheat to do whatever, then you should have to pay just as well as anyone else. So my goal, one of my main goals is that to try to get that took off the table for prosecutors. That you can lie, you can cheat, you can put people away, and you know you put them away wrongly. I could have died for their mistake. So that is my goal, to try to get that off or make them be held accountable in some way for what they've done to me.
I think if you eliminate, like Elwood said, sovereign immunity, that would be a huge step. I don't know that you'll get the legislature to go that far, but I think a meaningful step that is not outrageous is if they change the discovery rules and simply went to open file discovery, where everything in the prosecutor's file has to be turned over to the defense. Montgomery County has had an open file discovery for years, and I'm sure it's happened maybe, but I'm not aware of death penalty cases getting reversed or having problems in Montgomery County because of Brady violations. But if you want to remove any gamesmanship, you can think about what Joe Dieters and Mark Pietmeyer said in this case. Well, we gave them what they were supposed to have under the law, but the law changed since then. Well, first off, they didn't. Second, that was a lie, because the law did not change after his trial. It changed before. Didn't change. It just became more clear before his trial. But if you had open file discovery, there is no question. You don't get to decide whether it's exculpatory or not, or do we have to disclose this or not. If you've got it, you have to give it over.
For me, I mean, I think there are all sorts of things that are wrong with the system. But when I look at Elwood's case, what happened wasn't so much a failing of the system as it was a failing of individuals. And I think, as Jay said, the prosecutors lied to the jury. That's what happened. And although there wasn't an open file policy in Hamilton County at the time, the Supreme Court of the United States had ruled in multiple cases that the kind of information that wasn't turned over to Elwood was information that was supposed to be turned over to Elwood. So without changing anything about the system or changing anything about the rules, Elwood never should have been convicted. And the reason he was is because humans lied. And I think that for me, the biggest takeaway is that when you go to local elections and you see things like the elected prosecutor on the ballot, people need to educate themselves about who that is and what they stand for and how they're going to practice. Because for too long, Hamilton County had somebody in that position that was not following the rules. And as Jay said, Elwood's not the only person that something like this happened to.
Yeah, thank you. Qualified immunity, and I hear to voting, like thinking about who we're putting in these positions of power. Yeah, it's all really important. Elwood, can you talk a little bit maybe about some of the things you hold personally that helped you keep going? Like what inside of you drove you to keep going when like doors would close or when you spent another year in prison? Was it a person or a practice or something, like a promise to yourself, a mantra? What was it?
It was a promise to myself and my faith. I vowed that, and believe me, it's been many nights, and I'm not ashamed to say it, that I even laid up and cried. But I just felt that eventually somebody would hear me, and they did. And so it wasn't did in vain. I've seen a lot there that I don't think is worth they're talking about. And I just, I say this, when you sit down and you talk to someone and you hear the police run in saying somebody that killed themselves, and that's the same person you talk to, that the pressure just overtook them and they go in the cell. So people ask me to talk about death row. It's nothing pleasant to talk about. I just hold on to my faith, and that one day I may get it back, may not. But at the end, I knew if I didn't, I was going to die. And nothing was going to change that.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing. I always like to note like just how important and powerful and like how much of an emotional toll this like takes on people for them to share their stories. And I just hope you know how valuable, I tell you this all the time, but just how valuable it is to hear these things and for other people to hear them. Because these are real people that we put away and these are real people that we do these things to. And it's easy for us to like push those people aside. Is there anything that you want to share about yourself, like outside of this whole court case and exoneration? Like, is there anything about you that you want to share that, yeah, is special to you?
Yeah, you're muted.
Okay, now good.
Family is special to me. My family is. And they're special, and they have always been special. And others outside of that are special. People I meet. And kids are really special to me because I find them amazing. And some of the things they do and the doings of them. So it's a lot to give me pleasure to see. And it's things some people say, like, how do that give you pleasure?
Elwood, why don't you tell people about the bears and the things that you make?
Yes, I do a lot of that, make teddy bears and all, but I make most of them just to give people. I sell some of them for little fees and things I need, and you know that, but I always try to volunteer to give something away.
Here,
Yeah.
show them this.
Oh, here's one of them in here. Yeah, pretty big. The bigger one probably be the large one, but all right.
Where did you learn to sew? How did you learn to sew?
My mother and father and sisters them sewed, so it was their install. Yeah.
I'm continuously working on my sewing skills. I remember when my grandma made me like sit and practice lines on the sewing machine, but I joke with Elwood a lot that he's much better than me at sewing.
I can pretty much sew, but I can do a few other things. I can make little things out of wood, jewelry boxes. So it's just something I do find out to pass my time. I did it up there. Even draw a little bit, poems and all. So.
Oh, that is true. You're really good at drawing.
Yeah.
Should show that off. If it was nearby, I would go grab some of the things you sent me. Before we dive into Q&A, we have like this one last question. Well, before Q&A, not the last question, but if each of you could finish this sentence, justice would look like blank. So finish the sentence, justice would look like blank.
Dave, that's such an easy question. Why don't you go first?
So I struggle with this because if we're talking about justice in this case, as I'm primarily a civil litigator, and I got involved in 2019, and the original focus was the evidentiary hearing that we had in 2022, and winning that and getting Elwood's conviction overturned and getting him out of prison. There was this moment of celebration where you're like, oh gosh, justice. And then almost immediately you take a step back and you have to think about, it was almost 10,000 days that he spent behind bars. 6 times he was scheduled to be executed. There's nothing about this that's justice. And so to answer the question, I would say justice looks like none of this ever happening. And what we're working towards is not really justice. What we're working towards is trying to fix what can be fixed or address what can be addressed. but at least in terms of this case, justice wasn't served, and that's sort of this. That's the story.
I don't know that I agree with Dave. That's not a simple fill in the blank question. And I think the reason is this. If you look at our system kind of in the abstract, it's not perfect, but it's by far the best system probably anywhere in the world. That said, going to what Dave ended up with, justice would be if this never happened. And I think the Innocence Projects have gotten a handle on how to get closer to that, because with the number of exonerations, they go back and they kind of do an analysis of why was this person wrongfully convicted. Here we have Brady violations. You have bad forensics. You might have jailhouse snitch testimony. There are these things that contaminate and corrupt the justice system that if you eliminated those, you would still have, just because it's not perfect, a certain percentage of people who would be convicted who are innocent. But the number of people that would happen to would drop dramatically as a percentage because there's humans involved. But if you got rid of jailhouse snitch testimony, you had open file discovery where you don't even have to consider Brady. You had forensics from qualified, certified labs and people who are challenged. One of the reasons that I think that the system has problems, and I know Dave and I have even talked about this, is part of it is the defense bar's problem. And when I say the problem is we've not been aggressive enough in challenging the prosecutors in their case, in their evidence. You see something that doesn't make sense forensically, we won't worry about it. And that's how it kind of starts and it builds. And I don't know if it's lazy. I don't know if it's, in some places, it's because of the way the system is set up that there's an incentive to meet the client, plead them, because most people, especially with capital cases, have appointed counsel. You hear nightmare stories about a capital defendant not even meeting with his attorney till the morning of trial. I mean, there's always going to be issues because of human involvement. But if you can fix what we know we can fix, you eliminate jailhouse confessions. There are some states that have taken great steps towards reducing or minimizing the problems caused by that. I think Northwestern University did a whole project on that.
Yes, they did.
And I think if we can fix what we know the problems are, there'll be another layer of problems underneath that. But we've addressed the 5 or 6 big ones. And I think justice, going back, is how do we fix the system so we don't repeat the same mistakes? That I guess was a long answer to get to that.
It's great.
I agree with both of y'all, but I look at it just a little different from. I think attorneys in general, Dave and Jay are good, very good attorneys, and they are faithful to their clients and doing what they are supposed to do. But I recall reading a few things. They got a code of ethics canon that if you say the wrong thing, attorneys are not allowed to challenge another officer of the court. And that sometimes hinders them from doing their job. I really believe that.
What do you mean?
That if you see something wrong, for example, you couldn't just come right out and call Pete Ma a liar. You can get brought up, sent to the bar association for that.
Well, I think what Elwood's he's on a point, because under the code of ethics, the disciplinary rules, we're supposed to be self-policing, but it is very hard to do that in real time. That said, I don't think Dave had a real problem with it in the hearing, the 3-day hearing with Judge.
Well, he didn't.
I didn't have a problem with it, and here's the difference. We had the material to say they were liars. We could prove out they were absolute 100% full of shit. At trial, his defense attorneys didn't have that benefit. They knew it because intuitively it didn't make sense.
But even though just take that just one step further. In this case, even it's been said, even with you, Dave, you and him, making that still Hampton, for a good example, what I'm saying, I'm at is I can speak highly about this county. This county is probably one of the most corrupt counties it is in the state of Ohio. Hamilton County has always been that way, and the prosecutor's office, that anybody go up against them, they either gonna get fired or they either gonna something else gonna happen to them. And it's so clear. I can even go with Amber Hunt. She ended up losing her job for trying to do the right thing. She ended up losing her job as a reporter and lost the podcast. And something has got to be did, and it's got to be did to, if you speak of justice, that everybody's got to play by the same rules.
I think what he's talking about, it goes back to what, I mean, anybody with kids starts with consequences. And police departments have not had consequences for years with misconduct they engage in. Prosecutors protect them. Prosecutors have no consequences for misconduct they engage in. And until there are consequences by removing sovereign immunity or a given disciplinary committee, council, Supreme Court, whatever, starts really making it a point to have meaningful consequences, instead of issuing opinions that say, we've counseled the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office numerous times about inappropriate comments and closing arguments, and we're really getting tired of doing it, but don't do it again. And they keep doing it, and there's no consequences. It's hollow. And that's what it comes down to. However you put it, there's no consequences.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, because even in this case, I remember when my case went before the Supreme Court, I said, well, they're going to reverse it. They said, how many times we must tell prosecutors not to do something? They turn right around and do it. Well, I didn't go nowhere.
And now you got one as a Supreme Court justice. So it's not going to get better.
Yep. This kind of segues really well into the Q&A portion. The first, I think you pretty much covered this, but just in case there's anything you would add. So the first question was, when prosecutors intentionally lie or misrepresent the facts of the case, and that comes to light, is there any punishment rendered? So you talked a little bit about these, like basically the court might rule like, please stop doing that. But is there anything else you would add to that, answer that question?
Who, me?
You want to do it, Dave?
I mean, Jay, you're probably better suited to answer this, but sovereign immunity, the meaningful answer to that question is no. There are, as you said, there are situations where the court may say to a particular prosecutor, hey, don't do that. And from a disciplinary standpoint, as Jay said, there are mechanisms for self-policing where we could report, an attorney for ethical violations. I don't want to say those don't go anywhere, but for various political reasons, that's sort of a problematic and not particularly effective way of redressing the issue. From a compensation or like a civil standpoint, that's what the whole sovereign immunity thing is. They really can't be held liable for their actions. And there are certain very, very limited exceptions to sovereign immunity, but and I don't have the figures on this. I don't think that those exceptions have been applied very much, if at all, in Ohio history, or certainly in Hamilton County.
I mean, you basically have three areas you can have consequences. You can have consequences ethically under the disciplinary code. You can have consequences in court with the conviction being reversed, like we had with Elwood. And then you have adverse job consequences. And I will say this, County Pillage got rid of 2 prosecutors who should have been gone long ago. And the one has been a cancer in that office for years. And if you ever talk to anybody about it, they go, oh, he's such a nice guy. He's a dishonest, lying pig. Okay, that's not a nice guy. That's not what you want. If it's your family member who's accused or you're the one accused, you don't want a nice guy. You want an honest guy with integrity. That was not him. Connie got rid of him. And I think that's one of the first times I've been practicing over 35 years, that prosecutor has had adverse job action because of something like that happening. And it wasn't just one time. Everybody can make a mistake, but over a career in the prosecutor's office, that's your method of operation. You got to go. And we now have a prosecutor who did it.
And yes, Tigger.
There were a few comments, so just for some clarification purposes, there are a few comments or questions just kind of around like who was in charge during that time, and some questions about like Joe Dieters. So if you guys could clarify maybe like who was in charge when Elwood was convicted, and
Joe Dieters.
Joe Dieters.
Joe,
Yeah.
Joe
And then
Dieters had the rings, and he's the one who was in charge. He eventually turned it over to Mike Allen, but he was in charge. Mark Piedmont was in charge. Seth Tigger was in charge. And the sad part about all that, they was involved in this case from day one. They said. And so it's nothing. They keep saying, well, we didn't have that or this. You was involved in it. Why shouldn't you have it? You went to the grand jury 4 times and didn't get an indictment.
I think, just to be clear, Joe Dieters at the time was the elected county prosecutor. Mark Piedmont was one of his chief assistants. And I'm not sure what Seth Tigger's title was. I know he was a prosecutor, but I don't know where in supervisory. And even today in the prosecutor's office, if you have a murder case, there's 2 people who have tried it because it's a big job. But Mark Piedmont and Seth Tigers were the trial attorneys who made the decisions what to disclose, what not to disclose, what to say, what not to say, and so on. And what's interesting, I was looking at the one comment here is, has Dieters ever had to answer any questions? Dieters has never, as far as I'm aware, ever been challenged to answer any of these questions directly. And Mark Piedmont has repeatedly dodged asking them. After the last press conference where they were on the Cunningham show, they had a little media availability down in the lobby. And I know a reporter said, Mark, what about the form that said the police report that the rings were not unique, one of a kind, that Uncle Ira had them in his house? And he said he looked like a deer in headlights. So I would really love to see Mark Piedmont answer that question with an honest answer, because he can't. The only honest answer is, I lied and I didn't disclose the information, because we've got it in his file now. And that's one of the things that I think is inherently wrong. They've not been held accountable for any of it. But I'm pretty certain at some point they will have to answer those questions soon.
Could you guys explain, there was like the coroner who came out with a report like shortly after the exoneration. Could you guys explain why Connie Pillage said Elwood is medically excluded as a suspect?
Yeah.
And some of the confusion around that. Yeah.
Sure. So, and we've talked about some of the evidence that they use, the pendant and things like that, the witnesses. One of the main theories of the case that they used was the bacteria in Elwood's hand, they said somehow connected him to the murder. It absolutely, objectively, as a matter of empirical science, does not. And that was one of the things that was presented at the hearing in August of 2022. Something else that came out at that time, though, was the fact that when Elwood in September of 1994 voluntarily submitted, blood and DNA samples so that they could test him against the crime scene, they took the blood that he volunteered and they tested it for hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is like incredibly contagious, and if you take their theory of the case where he's gashed his hand, has a big cut on his hand, and there's this bloody scene. He would have been, the testimony is that he would have been exposed to the virus. There are tests that can be run and that have been run now that demonstrate that Elwood, not only does he not have hepatitis B, his body has never even been exposed to the antigen. So like he has not been vaccinated for it. He's never been, the virus has never been introduced to his body and fought off. It's not there. And that's what she was referring to when she said, like, this, as a matter of science, if you take this narrative, this story of the case, it's impossible. And that's what the expert testimony was at that hearing. With regard to the coroner, and I don't know exactly what happened there or why the coroner decided to wade into this 10 days after Elwood was exonerated, but she issued a press release and then went on the radio claiming that she had discovered a new piece of evidence saying that Ms. Nathan was not did not have hepatitis B, and that this medical exoneration wasn't true. In reality, she was looking at the test result for Elwood, which showed that he was negative for hepatitis B. Also in the file was a very clearly marked document demonstrating that the victim, Rhoda Nathan, did indeed have hepatitis B, and that test result was corroborated multiple times. There was no question about the fact that she had it and that Elwood does not. And so we reached out to her and said, what is this based on? And you need to retract this. And we got kind of a tepid retraction, but no explanation as to why that public statement was made without first reaching out to, if not us, then at least the prosecutor who could have clarified that for her.
Thank you. Yeah. More smoke and mirrors. This next question, so Ahmad Issa and Lamont Hunter, they took the dark plea out of Hamilton counties, and they're now currently living in poverty and don't have prospects for state assistance. Now that Elwood is formally exonerated, what are his prospects for compensation from the state?
Sure. So last week that we filed? There is a statutory structure in Ohio. If you meet the definition for a wrongfully imprisoned person, then you are, as a matter of law, entitled to certain amounts of money. The first step in that process after you reach that definition or satisfy the terms of that definition is to file an action for what's called a declaration of wrongful imprisonment. That action has already been filed, and we don't expect that to be particularly hostile or adversarial because, as just a matter of objective black and white language, Elwood meets the criteria. He was a wrongfully imprisoned person. Once you get that declaration, then there's an opportunity to file an action in what's called the Court of Claims, where you're technically suing the state of Ohio. And there are funds that are set aside by the state in order to compensate people like Elwood who were wrongfully convicted and wrongfully imprisoned. Separately, there are opportunities for civil lawsuits against various state authorities or municipalities. That's a separate issue, though. That's a more typical of a civil lawsuit.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this. That was our last question in the Q&A. Elwood, I want to give you an opportunity to share maybe some of the events or things you have coming up this year, and then also just maybe give each of you a little bit of time to say one last word before I close us out. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to Notre Dame to speak at Notre Dame in March. I'm also up in Cleveland at Carroll University with you. And I'm going to Chicago and speak, and I got a trip. I'm going to Hawaii out there with Kenny Lawson and speak. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
His attorneys need to go?
Yeah.
Jay said the attorneys need to go. Well, thanks again so much for being here and sharing the story tonight. Is there any last thing that anybody wants to share with the audience that we didn't cover, or one last thing?
I think that one of the important things, and Dave touched on it before, is, we have in the next election cycle, presidents and senators, whatever, and they all impact our life, but you have a much greater chance of being impacted by a local race. So vote, but before you vote, study, ask questions, find out what these people are all about. And that would be a good step that anybody can take.
Yeah, same. And it's just kind of as a last word, we've mentioned a lot of people who were involved in this, many of whom on, from a negative standpoint, but a number of people. Judge Wendy Cross was the judge who oversaw the hearing in 2022 and who actually took the time to review all of the evidence and make what was at the time a very unpopular decision, but one that she recognized to be the right decision. And then sometime later, when Connie Pillage was elected prosecutor, she took the time with her team to engage in what all that Elwood has ever been asking for, which is an honest evaluation of the evidence. And when she did, as she said in her press conference on December 12th, you come to the conclusion after you review the evidence that he's just not guilty. This isn't even a function of like, do we commit the resources to it? He just didn't do it. And so, to Jay's point, pay attention to who you're voting for, and a big thank you to those two critical people who were elected and did what they were supposed to do, did what they were elected to do.
And I agree with you on that. And they have took a whooping. They have took a whooping from the public. And I think they do need our support, everybody, to look at. Judge Cross is up for election, and I'm gonna do what I can to help re-elect her, and I will do what I can to help re-elect Connie Bell. It's sorry to say it, and it took two women out of all the men that we had in them office to do the right thing. They took a whooping. I mean, they took a real serious whooping.
Go ahead and smile, Becky. It's okay.
Thanks. Things are good. Well, I'm grateful for everybody being on this call tonight. I'm grateful for you three. I threw some links in the chat for you to stay involved. Elwood's GoFundMe is in there. Some ways to get involved to help the No Death Penalty Ohio campaign, to get involved with OTSI and Ignite Peace. There is going to be another conversation happening with Dick Dieter and Kevin Werner on wrongful convictions on February 5th. And Ohioan Stops Execution, OTSI will be releasing a wrongful conviction report this month. So stay tuned for that. Elwood, you're getting a lot of love in the chat. So grateful to you too. So again, thanks everyone for being here, and I hope everyone has a great night. So yeah, that's a wrap. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.